Hi there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Molly. I'm a knitter based out of the San Francisco Bay Area where I live with my fiance and our cat Lola. On this channel I share all manner of crafty things. Typically that means knitting. I actually can't really think of a time. Well, I've shared a little crochet, but it's 95% knitting. Today I'm coming at you with a new podcast episode. It's been a while since I've done a really more traditional knitting podcast where I am talking about my finished objects, my whips, my acquisitions that I've kind of had over the last, weeks, months, whatever, because I did my last one right after my rather long and semi-unplanned hiatus, so I didn't really have time to talk about everything. And I've been up to a good amount the last few weeks. I have one finished object, 2 whips, and a whole slew of acquisitions. And I can already tell you that I'm gonna have some more acquisitions pretty soon because I have some orders coming that I'm still waiting for, and I have good amount of stress shopping to do after the recent events at the beginning of this month. I think I'm going to go shopping in San Francisco tomorrow. I have a gift card. I talked about that in my winter plans video. And speaking of my winter plans video, I don't actually have any of my winter plans cast on yet. I have one sweater that I really, really want to finish before I start my plans for the winter. That ties into my acquisitions. It's one of my whips. So we'll start talking about all of that. Why don't we go ahead and just jump in and start talking about my finished object. So my finished object is not exactly a seasonally appropriate garment. It's not a late fall to winter thing particularly. This is the Roll Neck Tank by Hannah Singleton. I made it out of Wobble Gobble Yarns Merino DK. That is a dyer who I believe unfortunately is no longer dyeing, but I use the colorway Purple Lotus. This is an item from my Make 9 this year. I think it's maybe the 4th one that I finished. So I'm not doing great there, although I've already mentioned that. And we'll come back to that a little bit later as well, my Make 9. For this one, I made the 3rd size, and that would be a 36-inch bust circumference based on the gauge of the pattern, although my gauge was a bit tighter. The gauge recommended in the pattern is 20 stitches in 24 rows over 4 inches. I mean, mine I think was about 22 in my swatch. It's probably closer to 21. Maybe it even is 20 in my finished object. I haven't actually measured, but my bust is about 37 to 38 inches. So it's 1 to 2-ish inches of negative ease. I ended up modifying this pattern quite a bit. I'll link my Ravelry project page where I outlined it in slightly more detail, but you're welcome to comment, message me on Ravelry, whatever, if you are interested in my mods and want to hear more. Going in, once I saw the pattern, the front and the back are meant to be made the same. So it's supposed to have a high rolled neck, which I did modify in the end as well, but it's supposed to have a high rolled neck, and you make the front and the back panel exactly the same. So what you do is you start at the shoulders, you cast on a certain number of stitches just across, and there's no shaping in the front or back, and the neck is just supposed to be like a hole where you cast on the stitches and you just pick up on either side instead of picking up and like shaping down with increases. I hope that makes sense. I wanted the front neck to be a little bit lower. I didn't really want it to like choke me. So what I did was I worked short rows for a bit in the front, and it's pretty subtle. I still wanted the neckline to be pretty high, but you can see that I did end up dropping it like 1 inch or 2 in the front. And the reason I did short rows instead of like increasing to a point and then casting on was that I wanted to be able to go without adding any neckline. Like I wanted the neck to look smooth if I didn't add anything, and have that like rolled stockinette texture without any sort of cast on stitches or increases along the sides to kind of make it look a little bit less finished. So I did some short rows along the neck. I also went in knowing that I wanted to add some kind of edging to the armholes. So I added a double knit edging to the armholes because I didn't really want to do ribbing. I didn't want something that would be totally different. I wanted it to look kind of stockinette-y as opposed to like rib facing the opposite direction. I wanted it to be a little more cohesive than that. So my initial plan was to try to do that while I was knitting the body and to just have a few stitches on DPNs on either side that I was working as I worked across the body, like in double knit, in a double knit stitch. But I couldn't really get the gauge right for that. It was looking very strange. Even just getting the gauge right for it here took some work. I first used maybe the same needle I used for the body, and the sleeves, it kind of like flared up at the corners. The other like modification I went in knowing I would make is that at the bottom I would do rib instead of, in the pattern there's some like purl rows to add some like bumps and ridges and like texture to the bottom, but I just wanted some basic rib there. So that's what I did. I also made it longer. I actually did end up going in and adding more length to it after I cast off. I was kind of playing yarn chicken in the end based on like all the yarn I used for the double knit edging. And when I went back and re-knit the armhole edging with a smaller needle, I had more leftover yarn that I then put into the bottom. And I think I ended up having like 7 grams left over. Now, the last thing that I did was add an I-cord to the neckline. So in the end, after I did everything, the neckline it just didn't look finished in the way I wanted. Like, it was rolling a little, it wasn't rolling that much. I don't know if I wanted it to look a little more rolled. I just wanted it to look a little different. So I ended up doing an I-cord. I think I used like size 9 needles and maybe size 6 or 7 for the body. I had to play around with what needle size to use so that my head would actually fit through the hole. This pattern, like I said, is meant to be pretty close to the neck. And I did widen the neck hole, which is something that is recommended in the pattern, that you try it on once you've knit like the front panel and then a little bit of the back to make sure that you're picking up like few enough stitches and leaving enough of a neck hole that your head fits through. I didn't really do that. I didn't try it on, but I did leave extra going into it. And then so after I added this I-cord edge. So in the end, it ended up being pretty different than the pattern called for. I ended up using more yarn than the pattern called for, like I said, although some of that was that I made it longer. I'll insert some pictures of me wearing it. It's still pretty cropped on me, and I'm like not a super tall person. I don't know. I guess I just, like, I wanted it kind of below my belly button or like at my belly button. I don't love like mega cropped tops for myself. So with that in mind, I made it longer. I've already used the little bit of extra I had in a granny square, although I did have to supplement with a little bit of a different sort of similar looking yarn. Overall though, I would recommend this pattern. I'm really happy with the mods that I made. I think it fits really nice. It's not really the time of year to wear it. It's starting to cool down here in the Bay Area. So I don't know how much wear I'll get out of it before like next spring, although it's not a bad layering piece because it's DK. It's not super, super thin. So like under a jacket, especially here where our weather's pretty mild, I might be able to get a few more weeks of wear out of this. So this is my one finished object of this video. I have 2 works in progress. I'll start with this one. It's in my Ginger Twist Studio project bag. It's upside down, but You get the idea. This is the Simple Thing by Melina Brell. It's just a small bandana scarf shawl, reminiscent, I suppose, of the Sophie scarf a little bit. And I'm making this in Ancient Art Yarns Nettle Soft DK in the colorway Cheshire Cat. I've probably talked about this yarn before. This is one of my single special skeins that's just been floating around my stash since last Christmas when I bought it at Fiber Artwork in Huntsville, Alabama. And I've been on a quest for a while to use my single special skeins and, you know, just like put them into something. And I thought about making a cowl or something out of this, but I'm actually really enjoying this pattern. So this is a free pattern. It is knit corner to corner, so you cast on a few stitches, cover my face, you cast on a few stitches at the end, you increase to a certain point. I don't know if there might be like a recommended number of increases in the pattern, but I increased until I'd used about half my yarn, and then you just decrease until you get down to like 4 stitches or whatever it is at the end. I haven't really looked at the pattern at the end very closely, but I assume you kind of graft your I-cord like edging together at the end. I don't know if I said this yet, but it's a free pattern and I have really enjoyed making it. It's very easy. I think it would make a good present. And this yarn is really fun to work with. So it is, like I said, a nettle blend. It's 68% superwash merino, 32% nettle fiber, and it's 263 yards per 100 grams. I've worked with the fingering weight version of this yarn before and made a shawl with it, and I really enjoyed it. I would actually really like to maybe, when I go to Huntsville, assuming they still carry this yarn, I go to Huntsville every Christmas. It's where my fiance is from, and his mother usually gives me money or a gift card to buy yarn. It's not like pooled too badly in this variegated colorway. There are some points obviously where it pooled a little bit more than I might have liked, but it's worked really well so far. I was a little bit worried. I'm on the decrease side. It's interesting having the rows get shorter. It's feeling like it's like moving faster now. This has been my main commute knit. I've been making little shorts of myself knitting on my commute and working on this then and tracking how much I'm able to do as I commute. It's been fun. I've been enjoying doing that. And besides commute days, I haven't been knitting on it much. I have another project that's not necessarily much harder. It's just there are currently 4 skeins of yarn attached to it. We'll talk about it in a second. That I tend to work on at home because I really want that finished. I'm not in a huge rush to have this, although like I said, I'm really enjoying it. And I'm enjoying kind of getting myself to knit on my travels again. I spent a lot of my time on my commute just staring into space, listening to podcasts, playing mindless games on my phone. There's something kind of nice about like motivating myself to knit as much as possible, just as like a little game to keep my commute a little less soul crushing. Luckily I only do it once a week, but it's an hour and 15 minutes each way. This has been a good distraction for me during my commute. My next work in progress has all sorts of yarn attached to it. This is the coloring book tee by Amy Scher. I am using Knit Picks Muse Fingering in Delight Speckle and Mod Yarn's Loopy de Loop in the colorway Like a Virgin. And I've recently added in some additional yarn, some undyed bear sock yarn that I believe is Stroll by Knit Picks. This has been the project that I have been knitting on for a while, and this is the one I knit when I'm at home. So if you've been a while, you might know that I had plans for these 2 yarns. So this is the Knit Picks Muse in Delight Speckle. It's 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and 423 yards per 100 grams. Mod Yarn's Loopy de Loop is an alpaca boucle yarn. I have it in this undyed color called Like a Virgin. It's 89% alpaca, 11% nylon, and one skein is 874 yards and 100 grams, which is super appealing to me. I think it's about $30 to $40 from Black Squirrel where I got it, but it is like a whole, well, close to a whole sweater's worth of boucle yarn. I guess it depends what you hold it with. I had plans for this yarn. My original plan was to make a Cozy Classic Light, which is a pattern by Jessie May, just as another simple raglan pattern. When I swatched, my gauge was about something like 22 to 23 inches and 36 rows over 4 inches. So my row gauge ended up being a little bit of a problem when it went to actually look and pick out patterns. What I probably should have done is knit this at like a looser gauge. I mean, it's not like super tight. I can like kind of see through it. It's not like, and it's flowy. It's not like, it's not gonna stand up by itself when I like put it down, you know? Like it's not that stiff. It's not really stiff at all. But the gauge of Cozy Classic Light had I think it was maybe 30 rows. It might have been 28. It was definitely quite a bit fewer rows per inch than I was getting. The coloring book tee was 32 rows, and both of those patterns were 24 stitches per 4 inches. In the end, I decided I would try the coloring book tee. My project gauge is probably looser. It's probably like 22 to 21 inches. But my problem when it came to picking a pattern that had that stitch gauge was that the row gauge was then much looser than my row gauge ended up being in the swatch. But again, like I said, I'm having this like conundrum where I have to make educated guesses based on my swatch what my finished project gauge will actually be, and it is usually looser, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I started this pattern, I have almost finished the body, and I added the neck a bit ago. Technically, I think it's supposed to be the last thing you do, but I'm worried about yarn. It became pretty apparent to me once I started knitting this that I will never frog this. There is nothing you could do to make me frog this. It's very sticky yarn. The loops make it kind of hard. Like sometimes your needle ends up going through the loops. All sorts of things happen that I think make this something that I never want to frog. I don't think it's like a problem with the yarn per se. You know, that's just the nature of a yarn like this. It's my first time working with a boucle. I think that's probably just what working with boucle is like. So I have one try to do this right in my mind. Like, you could not pay me to frog Half Twisted Rib in these two yarns in this combination. Having about 850 yards of this yarn, or the combination of yarns, this yarn in particular was the one I had a little less of, I realized like I probably would prefer, if I'm having one shot at this, to just make it something with long sleeves. So that's where the bare yarn comes in. I pulled this undyed yarn out of my stash. Like I said, I bought a good amount of Knit Pick Stroll a while ago. That's a 4-ply 75-25 typical sock yarn that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 460 yards per 100 grams. And I think that's what this is because I bought a good amount of it a while ago with the intention of experimenting with dyeing, which I still want to do, but it just ended up being easier to use it in some projects. Like I found things where I was like, oh, I could totally use a bare yarn right now. So I would use it. So I think that's what this is. There's a couple other sock yarns it could be, but like, you know, I know my yarns pretty well at this point, and I know that this is like a superwash 4-ply sock yarn. What I've been doing is kind of fading out, I'll try to do it this way, is fading out the Muse, fading out the speckled yarns. I started doing 3 rows of the Muse and then 1 of the bare yarn, and then after a couple rows of that I did 2, then 1, then 1 and 1. Now at the very end I probably have like 6 or so rows maybe before I start the ribbing. I'm doing 2 rows of bare and 1 row of the Muse. Now what this did require was that I get more of the Loopy de Loop, which is my first acquisition. So I got 1 more skein of it. Black Squirrel had an anniversary sale. I will probably have a good amount of this left over, which I will then I don't know, use in something else probably at some point, or maybe just give away if I really can't think of something. But I feel like I kind of will wing my projects a lot, and I often need some sort of carry along yarn, and this would be a perfect option. It's good, it's just a little tedious, like untwisting all the yarns when I get to the ends of the rows, and like making sure that everything is unstuck from each other and that I can knit like unimpeded with the different colors when it's time to knit with them. Like I said, I should be finished with the body soon. The sleeves will go faster, and I think I have about 40 grams left of the Muse. So my plan is to split this into 2 approximately equal sized balls, and then I'll just use them on the sleeves along with the berry yarn and kind of alternate and figure out what I can do to make them at least probably like 3/4 length. Like I think I want them past my elbow. That is my second finished object and my first acquisition. We can go ahead then and transition into my acquisitions, which are best told, I suppose, as a series of planned projects. I have a lot of yarn, and I've made a lot of different orders from different local yarn stores across the country. 2 of them have come. I also got yarn from Black Squirrel. So we're going to go ahead and talk about them based on the project. Starting with the Stria cardigan by Andrea Mowry. I have a plan to make this in Rosa Pomar Mondim. That is a 100% Portuguese wool yarn. 100 grams is 421 yards or 385 meters. During the yarn crawl, back in March, April, I bought, I forget how many skeins of this color, which is like a gray brown. The colorway is 117. My plan was to use this in a cardigan. This cardigan has 4 contrast colors, so I got 2 contrast colors, and I figured I would deal with the other ones later. I got this color, 111, and I got this color, 113. I've been looking at yarn online. I've been kind of itching to buy more yarn. I don't need it, but I figured there's another project that I'll talk about, and I was kind of on the lookout for different yarns. And I thought, what if I got some more Mondim to go with the ones that I have? So I checked local stores. I wasn't really able to find colors that spoke to me. I wanted sort of like a saturated, like yellow, purple, green, something in that palette. And I looked at some other yarns. I considered other yarns, but I was hoping I could get some Mondim. These yarns have cat hair all over them. I'm sorry about that. Everything has cat hair all over it. When you have a fluffy white cat, there's cat hair. I made an order with Apricot Yarn and Supply in San Diego, a store that I've actually been to. I ordered a green and a yellow, and I got a call from them that the green was out of stock. And they didn't really have any other colors that I wanted of that type in that sort of palette. So I asked them to just skip the extra skein. So they sent me a yellow. I tried to order green from another store that was out of stock. I asked about a second green color they had, and that was also out of stock. They had like 1 skein supposedly in their inventory, but I can imagine that when you are like doing a lot of in-person business and online business, things can get kind of lost in the shuffle. So they didn't have either of the greens I asked for. I do have a couple things coming from them, but it's not here yet, so we'll talk about those next time. They're just a couple mini skeins. This is the yellow I got from Apricot Yarn and Supply. So this is the palette we're working with right now. I was able to find a store that had a good amount of Mondim in a variety of colors, and a green that I was interested in, and some other yarns that I was interested in, which we'll get to. And that was the Yarnery, which is in St. Paul, Minnesota. I believe they actually just had their grand opening or grand reopening in a new location. So that was helpful for me when I went to place an online order, that it didn't seem like they were selling a lot of stuff in store. They also had like 10 or something skeins left of the color I wanted. So I was able to order from them and they were in stock. I got this color. This is C574. And so this is the final palette of the Stria cardigan. I feel like a lot of times the colors, the way that I envision colors working in my head doesn't end up working out as well in person, but I'm very hopeful for this. Stay tuned. I think that this is one of my goal projects for next year. I have one last thing for that, and that is buttons. So, like I said, I went to Black Squirrel. They had an anniversary sale. I got these 6, I don't know how to show these to you. I'll try like this. These 6 tan mother of pearl buttons. I'll hold it up against my main color so you can kind of see if this will focus. There we go. So that's what the buttons look like against the main color. And it called for 6 buttons that were 3/4 inches or 18 millimeters. So that's what I got. The next project is a Lento by Jonna Hyland. And I plan to use yarn that I bought at Apricot Yarn and Supply and the Yarnery. So we're revisiting those orders again. In my Apricot order, I got this colorway of Mondeem. This is M77. I thought that it looked cool, and so I wanted to try it. I just think it's like a fun mix of colors, but then I had the goal of trying to figure out what to do with it. This is what I got, 2 skeins. To go with that, I got Kama Rose Midnut Sole. I got 4 skeins of that. And I was intrigued with this as a mohair alternative. Mohair works okay for me, but I'm always interested to see what other options are out there, like the boucle, like I'll talk about a Surrey in a second. And I had this thought of like, okay, if I could find a contrast color that would work, maybe I could do something like a Lento and have enough yarn for more or less a whole sweater if I'm able to find something that I could knit at a pretty open gauge. I got the colorway Liss Mint 9578. This yarn is 54% baby alpaca, 36% lyocell, and 10% merino. There are 218 yards per 25 grams or 200 meters. It's a little bit thicker than a lot of the mohairs I see, which tend to be more in the like 230 plus yards per 25 gram range. It should work out well. I like that it's a little thicker. I think that these colors together will be interesting. I think that this will work nice and kind of like tone down, add some dimension to some of these like darker stripes in the yarn. To wrap up my purchases from the Yarnery, I got this yarn. It's Viking yarns in the Torig sock base. This colorway is called Wildflower Meadow, and this base is 463 yards per 100 grams, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and it's a 2-ply yarn, and it has these little speckles in it. I got this to pair with some Woolen Works yarn I got at Firebird Yarns in San Francisco during the yarn crawl. I think I'll probably do something like a Sophie scarf with this, and this is a fingering weight Surrey. It's 100% Surrey, and 100 grams is 400 meters, which I think is around 420, 430 yards. The one complaint I have about the Yarnery is that I don't think they have the very best pictures of hand-dyed yarn. Like, they kind of just have like a little bit of a skein, and they don't show like full skeins. I had an idea that this would be a little less green, although I guess maybe I should have been tipped off by the name Wildflower Meadow. I think these will still work together. It's pretty subdued, and this is, you know, a natural color. It has a lot of different colors throughout. And this one has some speckles. So I hope it'll work. If it doesn't, I do have a lot of bare yarn sitting around. I just thought it would be fun if I could add something that had a little bit of a dimension to this for a scarf project. I have a lot of bare yarn and I might end up using some of that instead. But this is tentatively going to be a scarf. And this colorway is called Fairy Bread, by the way. I don't think I said that. This is the final project-based acquisition that I have. And that is Life in the Long Grass Twist Sock and the colorway Chirp. And this is for my not Elfmail. So if you know about my Make 9, I had a plan to make the Elfmail by Danny Miga with these two yarns. These two yarns being Lefty Knits 2-ply sock in Oil Slick and Dirty Water Dye Works Lillian base, which is also a 2-ply sock, or it might be 100% merino, this one. 100% merino 2-ply in the colorway Sea Glass. Now, I swatched for the Elfmail, or I started swatching for the Elfmail, and I didn't like how this looked. There was not enough contrast. I think when I ordered the Oil Slick, and I do really love this color, I expected it to be a little darker than it was. You know, they say try looking at the your image in black and white. So I took a picture and looked at the colors in black and white together, and I could not tell the difference. So there's just very little contrast between these two. I did not like how they looked in the broken seed stitch. Maybe in a different stitch, I would prefer it. But the Elfmail now with these two yarns is off the table. So I have been looking at different yarns, thinking of something I could maybe add to this. And I've been looking for a 2-ply yarn that was about 400 yards per 100 gram and some amount of superwash merino with probably nylon, but maybe not. This doesn't have nylon, this does. Enter Life in the Long Grass Twist Sock, which is 80% superwash merino and 20% nylon. Like I said, this colorway is called Chirp, and there are 400 yards or 365 meters per 100 grams. I ordered this, like I said, from Apricot Yarn and Supply in my order, and I think my expectation was that I would like it most with the Sea Glass, and I do like it with the Sea Glass. But it also has these flecks of red, which I think look pretty good with, I'm trying to cover my face, which I think look pretty good with the Oil Slick as well. So I would love to find something to do with the three of these together. I think I might need to use the Chirp kind of in between these two. I don't know what that will be. It might be a shawl. It might be something else. I might swatch this somehow and have it might look terrible. I could imagine doing a tee potentially, although that could look a little busy. Maybe I'll make a cowl and use this as the contrast color for both, or 2 cowls, I guess, and use this as the contrast color with each of these, or 2 tees, or I probably don't have enough yarn for tees, 2 tanks, something where I'm using this yarn as a contrast color with perhaps both of these. I am happy that I have this sort of idea that involves this yarn that definitely just looking at it will have enough contrast with these two yarns together or separately. We've reached the very home stretch. I have a couple random purchases. They're all from Black Squirrel from during the anniversary sale. I got these Pizza Cat stitch stoppers. They're like the needle point protectors. These are from Craft Co. I like pizza and I like cats, so they seemed appropriate. Some Lefty Knits 4-ply fingering weight yarn in the colorway Moonbeam. This is a 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, 423 yards per 100 grams. And I thought the colorway was really pretty. And last, I got some bamboo pop yarn. This is a 50% cotton, 50% bamboo yarn. It's by Universal Yarns, and there are 100 grams and 292 yards in this ball. This colorway is called Blue Whisper, and the reason I bought it is because I have this variegated bamboo pop that I got at Fiber Artwork, the store in Huntsville, and I haven't really known what to do with it, and I was thinking maybe I could mix these two yarns together in a tank again. I don't really know. This colorway, the variegated one, by the way, is called Soothe. So that is a lot. That's a lot of purchases. I feel like I always tend to buy a lot of yarn around this time of year. Maybe it's the weather change, maybe it's the holidays, the sales. It's probably a lot to do with the sales. Obviously, when I go to Huntsville, I buy yarn that I get gifted, essentially. There's a few more sets of acquisitions coming. I do plan in the future to really try to rein in my acquiring of yarn. I want knitting to be my primary yarn-based hobby, not buying yarn. You know, things have been a little weird recently, so I'm trying to give myself a little grace. I did do a little bit of shopping to try to supplement yarn I have for other projects, so we'll talk about that next time because those orders are not here yet. Nor is my Explorer Knits and Fibers Farmers Market collection order, which is something I got, so eventually we'll be talking about that too. It's kind of been a lot. It will continue to be maybe a lot for a couple more weeks, and then we're gonna try to stash down because at some point we have to move out of this apartment. And the more yarn that is either out of the apartment or made into clothing, the happier I will be. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed that tour through my projects and my very extensive acquisition collection. Thanks so much for joining. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. I have a bunch of different ideas floating around. I'll probably make a gift knit video in the future. I have some wedding based DIYs that I want to try out and maybe take you along. So if that kind of thing sounds interesting, as well as just general chats about what I've been working on, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'll see you here in another couple weeks, probably with some more yarn. In the meantime, I'd love to hear what you've been working on, what sort of projects you've had on your needles, what sort of yarn you've been buying recently, any sort of yarny or crafty thing that you've been doing. I would love to chat about it. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.